Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
Imagine a world-class graduate education that's accessible, flexible, and designed for career impact. That's Harvard Extension School. Build actionable knowledge and skills in challenging online classes taught by Harvard faculty and industry experts. Explore new opportunities and expand your network with high-achieving professionals from around the world. Part-time learning. Real-world impact. This is Harvard on your terms. Learn more at extension.harvard.edu/Spotify.
Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a very special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Film Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew, as always. That's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, well, it's given away by the title. I'm here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about development stories, marketing stories, release stories, production stories, all the ingredients, really, that go towards making the films that we know and sometimes love. Just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. The films I tend to cover on this podcast lean more towards the mainstream than anything else. They're films I'm interested in or invested in to some degree. I try not to do snark. I try not to punch down. This podcast is a celebration of cinema and a real appreciation that somehow, films manage to get made. What you've happened upon here is one of my occasional special episodes of the podcast where I bring in a filmmaker to talk about their latest release or body of work. You get a tiny bit of both, really, but who I'm joined with this time? Well, I'm joined by writer-director Jeff Nichols, someone I've been after for a very, very, very long time for this podcast. Now, Jeff was in the UK to talk about his new film, The Bikeriders. The Bikeriders was originally set to be released by Disney last autumn. Disney decided it no longer wanted to release the film and so relinquished the distribution rights on it. They were picked up by Focus Features, and thus Universal Pictures here in the UK is distributing the film. We had a conversation over Zoom, so it gets a little bit rickety just towards the end, so do bear with that just a little bit. Just to set the scene on The Bikeriders, it was a film shot in 2022 based on a photo book by Danny Lyon, and the cast stars Jodie Comer, Austin Butler, Tom Hardy, Michael Shannon, who's collaborated with Jeff Nichols on virtually all of his films. We touch on Take Shelter very briefly here. Mike Face is in it, Norman Reedus, Boyd Holbrook, Damon Herriman, Bo Knapp, Emery Cohen, Carl Glusman, Toby Wallace and Happy Anderson. It's a big ensemble. I mention them all just because we do talk about quite a few of them in the conversation you're about to hear. Now, the film itself is out on June the 21st, 2024 in the UK. And I'm going to set up the conversation you're about to hear. I think that's all you need to know going in, with just a clip from the trailer from the film. And you'll hear my conversation with Jeff Nichols, the other side of this.
I'm thinking of starting a riding club.
Why? All those clubs do is sit around talking about motorcycles.
That's what we do.
You don't belong nowhere else, so we belong together.
But you're the man in charge.
I'm Johnny. We're the Randos.
I'm Benny.
I like you guys.
Your boyfriends are getting into trouble.
What the hell were you thinking back there?
Nothing. I saw you scoring off with them guys. What do I need to think for?
Yeah, you and me, kid.
That was a clip from The Bikeriders. I'm really, really thrilled to be joined by its writer and director, Jeff Nichols, who joins us in a very plush-looking room for a Film Stories podcast special. Hello, Jeff Nichols.
Hey, nice talking to you. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute delight to have you. I'm on a hiding to nothing, I realise, because given the path that this film has taken, I appreciate you've sort of been doing press for it for about 9 months now.
Feels
So
that way, yes.
I reckon the next Indiana Jones film, the MacGuffin, should be the search for the question you've not been asked about the Bikeriders in the last 9 months. So I'm going to repeat everything anyone's ever asked you. I am curious what it's like when, but I'm not going to go over the saga that's kind of led us to this point because I'm sure you've talked about it a lot. But just when you've been answering questions about a film for 9 months, if you get to a point where you're just getting a bit itchy just to get back out there a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm sitting next to a window right now.
Don't jump.
Outside looks great. I would just get some fresh air. But the frustrating thing about it is, doing press is kind of like doing therapy. If you're really engaged in it, and I try to engage in it, like I want to answer these questions somewhat thoughtfully and honestly, if I can.
Yeah.
And when you are 4 months into press, like I am, and then you're like, you realize something that you haven't been saying, you realize something about your film that you missed, or there is a question where you're like, oh, that is what's going on. That's the most frustrating part, is like this constant state of self-discovery about this thing that you've been working on so long that you thought you pretty much had all figured out. And then somebody asks a question and you're like, well, I guess it could be seen that way. But, it's like whenever Townes Van Zandt would be asked about Pancho and Lefty, the song that he wrote, he would just start to come up with different tales of what it was really about. Because at some point, you give the answer that's the correct, or I guess the straightforward answer, and then you talk about it so much, you're like, well, it could also mean this. So it gets into kind of a dream state almost, and I'm there.
All right, I'm happy with that. I'll make them pump you up with a bit of coffee, and let's kind of see where we go. I mean, do you get frustrated by what you're not asked? Are there particular things about it that you just feel the release window of a film people don't go into? Not just exclusive to this film.
The worst thing about press are like the short interviews, the 6-minute interviews, because it is, why the book? Why did you have this idea? Which I'm happy to answer, and I will answer here. But then that's it, and they're like, and what's Austin Butler like? And that's it, or does Tom Hardy ride motorcycles? Yes, he does. And then you're done. The things I really love to talk about are, narrative structure. I spend so much time in a room by myself trying to figure out how to turn a photo book into a screenplay that works, into a movie that is going to, keep an audience engaged. And I'm obsessed with narrative structure and narrative drive and narrative questions. When does a movie fall apart? When does an audience, get bored, or when is an audience leaning in and totally engaged? I spend my days thinking about this. And those are the things I really love to talk about. I also love to talk about, the direction of this stuff and why I'm putting the camera where I'm putting the camera, why I'm moving it, when I'm moving it or not moving it. These are things that I like to talk about most, because it's what I really spend the most time thinking about.
You've talked about this being a triangular film, that you've got 3 core characters at the start of it. And my head was turned by an answer. It was Jennifer Lee, actually, the writer-director of Frozen, gave many years ago. And she talked about the hardest thing she found when writing. I'm paraphrasing her, so if she's listening, I've got this wrong, I apologize. But the hardest thing she found when writing a scene was getting the power dynamic in a scene right, just the little nuanced dynamic in there. And I mean, it's only on reflection, thinking about the Bikeriders, that you have these sequences where you have these very strong actors and very strong characters in a scene, and just how delicately, either as writer, director, or in the editing room, you're finding just getting the balance of them right. That's my grown-up question. It's the only one you're getting.
No, it's a smart question. I have to say, though, it's funny because different people have power at different times.
Yes.
In different moments, I'm just immediately, this scene between Jody and Tom, Kathy and Johnny, comes to mind, where it's really when the plot is kind of starting to be defined for the film, which, for good or bad, starts about an hour into the movie. Where she's coming by to get him to convince her husband to to drop out of the club.
Yeah.
She's very emotional, and she came in that scene, and she was like on fire. So much so that, and I think he's okay with me saying this, I think on the first take, Tom dropped a line because he was just staring at Jodie Comer just murder this scene. It was an awesome thing to watch. But what Tom does is he then slows way down, and it makes her even more frustrated. Maybe her, Jodie, but also her, Kathy. And so she's sitting there, trying to get these answers and trying to get him to commit to this thing. And he's just slowly smoking this cigarette. And so this dynamic all of a sudden, which is on the page, but it's kind of brought to a starker contrast by the performance of these two actors. It was a great thing to watch, and I remember at some point, Jodie was like, "Can you ask him to kind of speed up a little bit, because it's hard, because I'm at this pace and he's at this other pace." And I remember thinking like, well, let's just do another take, let's see what happens, because I remember thinking, oh, that's brilliant, that's so frustrating. what is it makes the scene even more frustrating for her.
Yeah.
And so that's an example of a power dynamic that was on the page, but then amplified by the performance of these two really incredible actors.
Yeah, I mean, to badly paraphrase something you've said in the past, you've implied that you leave your screenplays with room for the actors to discover more, that you're not mandating anything. So you've talked there a couple of times about on the page. I'm just, my dimwit question, I guess, is what does your page look like? If the cliche is like 120 pages is a 2-hour movie, how long a script is a Jeff Nichols 2-hour movie, and what are the gaps? What aren't we necessarily getting as audience members?
Well, I'm right there. I'm at a page a minute, but I direct on the page, but I have a lot of rules. There's no camera movement. That's not what a screenplay is for. But that being said, I can show you a line, not just a line of dialogue, any line of action, and I can tell you what the shot is that it represents.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a diet of the mind that you exercise as a writer, where you say, I'm not going to allow myself to write anything that I can't show on the screen. So, I think you read these screenplays sometimes and they put, for better and worse, they put a lot of interior kind of, monologue of these characters into the action. I don't allow any of that. It almost feels like Hemingway. You read Hemingway, and he was all about the distillation of the word on the page. And if it takes 5 words, is there one word that works? And can we bring those words into their most potent form, right? So there's a little bit of that happening. And if you go through the lines of action, though, if I want it to begin on a character's feet, that's what we're talking about. His feet go across the floor until he sits in the chair, and then he picks up his cigarettes. Like, that is 2 shots. That is a shot on the feet, and that's a shot on the cigarettes. What I don't do is the camera tracks the feet across the floor and then booms up to see him grab his cigarettes. I think that's bad writing, because if I'm reading a script, well, one, I'm a director, so it's like, don't do my job for me. Like, I got that covered. You just tell me this. And but it's also, it's bad for the reader. It separates them from the story. You really want them seeing it. And I've had compliments in the past. People that have read my scripts and they're like, I can just see the movie. And I think the actors respond to that as well, because they're not seeing, when you use camera direction on the page, it feels more like a blueprint. It doesn't feel like it's something you can get lost in. And I think the actors very much appreciate, kind of being carried away by just kind of the meat of what it is we're going to go execute. And then there's the whole issue of exposition. This is kind of the biggest pitfall that a writer can step into, which is, I have this idea and I just really want to get it out there to the audience. And so I'm going to either put it in the mouth of a character where it does not belong, or I'm going to go in these circuitous, routes in terms of plotting in order to explain it. And that's bad storytelling, is the truth. There are some stories that you have about your characters and that could very heavily influence your plot that just don't need to be told.
Yeah.
Maybe the structure you've come up with does not hold the weight of these other stories. And so again, kind of like a diet of the mind, as a writer, you have to say, I just don't get to say that. I don't get to put those words in that character's mouth. And that really comes back to kind of the fundamental principles that I apply to scripts, which is they don't turn on plot.
Yeah.
These characters are not chess pieces that we're moving around a board for some greater conclusion. No. These are life and blood characters, and they move because of their own personal logic, because their own set of rules, their own behavior, and their own emotions. That's what moves them. And if I, the writer, am trying to force them into situations, you feel it. You feel it immediately on the page and on the movie screen. And so, again, I think something that actors respond to when they're reading my scripts is hopefully the behavior tracks. And I'm talking about he gets up and moves away from her at the table.
Yeah.
Like, there's a reason that happens. And there's no fluff. There's no extra. It's just all pretty clear. Michael Shannon reads my scripts and is like, I get it. Okay, I know what I'm going to do. We don't really have to talk about it, And it's because I've gone through this exercise, hopefully, of streamlining the behavior and not trying to place my own needs as a storyteller onto the characters. It's 20 years of thinking about it.
Do you do the odd bit of script polish work for other people as well? I've read that of you before, but I've never seen.
No,
that.
I've never been paid to do that.
Yeah,
I love money. I would love to be paid, but I don't know. It's so hard.
Yeah,
and I think there is probably a misunderstanding, and I'm now talking myself out of some work. Although I'll still take the money.
I'll just clip this with the bit where you say, "I love money." That's the clickbait world, right?
There you go.
Got a 6-minute interview.
Jeff Nichols, I love money. I'm completely fine with that. I buy that statement. But I think especially, and studio executives have to think this way, because what else do they have?
Yeah.
But the idea that scripts and movies are plug and play, we'll just take that part out and let's put this other part in. It's like, well, you wouldn't do that to a Jenga set. You can't just take that block out because it's red and you want them all to be blue. The whole thing will crash. And sadly, yes, you can have a writer come in and punch up dialogue, I suppose. Those people exist. All kinds of people exist. But what does that even mean, punch up dialogue? Like, dialogue is supposed to come, you shouldn't be able to separate it from the narrative plot. You shouldn't be able to, you shouldn't be able to punch up dialogue. And I know it's been done. And I know really talented people come in and like, hey, can we get some more jokes in there for Indiana Jones? But it's not how I would like to make films. It's not how I think really great cinema probably comes to be. Because it's not plug and play. It has to be built from the ground up.
Every studio executive listens to this podcast and has just struck your name off the list. I want you to know that.
Obviously doesn't like money.
Doesn't like money at all, just wants to live in a shed. That's what they've written down. Can I just briefly touch on the logical point in an interview about the Bikeriders? Can I talk about Back to the Future Part 3?
Sure.
Because it sounds weird.
One in the Old West?
Yeah, that's the one that turned me on to westerns. I watched the Bikeriders. I'm just thinking, he's made a western. This is amazing. This is just bliss. But one of the things that I took from that, because I was an obsessive movie nerd as a teenager, and I read everything I could on that. And one of the things Robert Zemeckis said about Back to the Future 3 and the casting of it was the background that mattered. That he found all the actors who were in the old westerns and made sure they were in the background, even if they weren't saying anything or just said one line, because he just wanted to make that world believable. I've watched and loved a lot of your films. I don't think I've ever seen as many human beings on screen moving at one point in one of your films. And so I know you've talked a lot about the casting of Jodie Comer, of Austin Butler and Tom Hardy, but can you tell me about getting the background right? And how nuanced your work is there?
Well, I mean, it's pretty unreasonable that in this context of this conversation, we're considering guys like Michael Shannon and Boyd Holbrook background.
I come to them separately. They're in a whole.
It's bizarre, but they are.
Yeah.
I mean, like that. You have Jodie Comer walking into this bar for the first time to meet this entire group.
Yeah,
and if you compare it to the Goodfellas scene, right? Where they're walking in and gonna go get the papers. Like, we don't necessarily see those characters again. I think you might have them in a background of a scene here or there, but I'm introducing characters that are going to be around. Like, they're going to talk. We're going to hear from them. I mean, the first person she sees is Carl Glusman as Corky walk in and say, "Hey, beautiful, you need a man." And so it was really important, both narratively, to introduce these characters that way. But then we just had to have them. We had to have them hang out, which was a big thing to ask of these people. And so, I think when it comes to the casting of them, I was at a point in my career, and the project was cool enough where I could ask these people, to be there. I'm going to double back just real quick to your Zemeckis comment about Westerns.
Yeah.
Because what you really need to look at is John Ford.
Yeah.
John Ford had a stable of actors. These were the guys that he knew, because John Ford, you get the sense that he just didn't screw around. And he knew that he needed these guys in these supporting roles that had incredible faces and could just deliver.
Yeah.
You're over there working with the lead, and you're getting that performance adjusted, and then you've got a small amount of time to look over here at this one actor, deliver a line, and then get out of the way and take up just enough oxygen, not too much oxygen. And John Ford, I mean, you look at those films and it's just the same face, the same face, the same face. That guy understood what it was to have a troupe of actors. I've been really lucky, I think, to start to build that. Although there's some guys that I didn't get in this movie that I wanted. I would love to have had more Paul Sparks in this film. I didn't get Bill Camp, in this film. I didn't get Shea Wiggum in this film. I didn't get Scoot McNairy. I didn't get Jesse Plemons. These were all guys that I talked to at different times and would love. The problem is they're so damn talented. They're all becoming too famous. They all had lead roles that they had to go do, and it took me too long to make this film to get them all in there. Fortunately for me, I work with Francine Maisler as my casting director, and she has an innate understanding of what I'm looking for, which is faces. If you look at Danny Lyon's photographs, these faces are incredible. And it's not just about being pretty. It actually has nothing to do with being pretty. It has to do with being interesting, and these faces look lived in, and these human beings happen to be incredible actors, but they've got great faces. Look at Bo Knapp. I love this guy. Look at Toby Wallace, who's this young mad dog that we found on the streets of Australia. Who turns out he's actually been acting for a while, and this guy is wickedly talented. You're really. I'm first and foremost. I'm looking for faces. And then we do readings, and then they have to hold the lines. They have to be able to hold the lines and understand the subtext of the lines and the intention behind the lines. And that's when you find out whether they're real actors or not. Is how much they can adjust the intention of those lines.
I mean, you touched on Michael Shannon there, and I still remember being blown away by Take Shelter. That was my first of your films that I saw. An odd double bill. I spoke to Dexter Fletcher once, and I've asked this question of people a couple of times, but I think it really interests me. I talked to Dexter Fletcher once, who made a film, Eddie the Eagle, which likely you've not seen. I hope if you have seen. It's a delight. It's a delightful movie, but he had one role in that film which required just 5 minutes of screen time, and he needed an actor who who just had an immediate presence, who brought cinema history with his face as much as anything else. And so he got to Christopher Walken in much the same way I think you wrote to Michael Shannon once upon a time, just to get him originally involved in your work. When you've got a kind of Michael Shannon in your back pocket, can you find? I don't know. I don't quite know how to square it into a question. Really, I'm just really engaged with the idea that you bring someone in for 5 minutes and they don't need to say anything, and they make that level of impact. And I just wonder how how important those people are to your film.
Well, we'll get real specific about Michael Shannon and this film's impact on it. So, you got a lot of actors involved in this film, so the schedule is going to be interesting, to say the least, right?
Yeah.
And so my AD delivers me the first schedule, and he said, okay, so on day one, we're going to do the rally scene where they get into a big fist fight in the field at this rally. And on day one, we're going to have Michael Shannon give a monologue. And it's a big scene like that on day one is partly a negative because you have to establish all these characters. I don't know how many, you're probably 30 minutes into the film at the point that the scene hits, maybe 27. And it's going to be on the first day. So the way these characters look, the way they talk, I'm establishing Benny and Johnny and Zipco and Corky and Wahoo and, Brucey. And I mean, everybody is there pretty much, just not Kathy. And so, okay, well, we're going to have Michael Shannon give a monologue then. And it was awesome because the younger actors, but even Tom has said this, because Tom and Mike actually worked together way back. I think they were in an acting troupe together with Philip Seymour Hoffman way back in the day. Somebody should ask him about that. But anyway, so they respected each other. They share a management team.
Yeah.
And so here we are, we've got all these guys around, and it's like, okay, we're just going to sit and listen to Mike for a second. And I know this story, I'm telling Austin's anecdote, but there was a point about 3 takes in where, and I might be paraphrasing wrong, but Tom leans over to Austin, and this is their first day working together as well. They're listening to Mike, and Tom goes, he's in the pocket now. And it's like, it's these brilliant actors, like kind of recognizing each other and also recognizing that they're working with me, because I felt really comfortable with Mike. Mike and I mean, we've gone beyond collaborators. We're like brothers now, and I certainly do not take him for granted. Saying Mike Shannon's in your back pocket, like Mike Shannon is in no man's back pocket. Like every time he shows up, it's a miracle. But it was such a beautiful way to start this movie, because Carl and Bo, who are a little younger than Mike, you can tell they were looking up, and Mike Feist is there, getting to watch Michael Shannon deliver a monologue. They all talk about it, and it just set the tone. Not to mention Mike grew up in Chicago.
Yeah.
So already he has this natural facility with this accent. And so everybody's just kind of getting to listen, and take it in. And that was the first half of our first day, was this Pinko's monologue by Michael Shannon. And it was kind of invaluable on every level, to me and to the production.
That absolutely could have gone the other way as well, couldn't it? I mean,
Well,
just in terms of the fragility of your film.
100%. I don't know Tom, at that point. I don't know Austin. I mean, I don't even know, really. I knew Boyd Holbrook pretty well, through, we'd been talking about trying to make a movie together for a while.
I was reading that.
But it's like, but I don't know. They're going to, maybe somebody stands up and is like, why are we listening to this? Like, I don't know. I'm the lead actor. Like, why aren't we paying attention to me? But there was none of that. It was graceful almost.
There's an anecdote Roger Deakins tells about working on 1984, Richard Burton's last film, of course, and how everyone's intimidated by the idea of Richard Burton coming in, that he's got a young ensemble around him, and here he's just this person of such stature, and how Burton gathered them together at the end of it, and just after they'd been in fear of him for God knows how long, just said it's been one of the most refreshing experiences of my life. It's just wonderful.
I mean, you have to, every time I feel intimidation, you have to remember, these people want to engage emotionally.
Yeah.
they've gotten to the point in their lives and in their careers. The reason they are there is because they engaged emotionally, is because they recognized talent, and you just have to have the confidence to deal with them. I remember very much working with Sam Shepard on Mud, and I remember like he would call sometimes, and I wouldn't pick up the phone because I just didn't want to sound stupid, you know. But then I'm sitting on the beach on an island in the middle of the Mississippi River, and I see Sam Shepard walking up. And I said, "Hey, Sam." He's like, "Hey, Jeff." I was like, "You're not working today?" He's like, "Yeah, I just wanted to come hang out." And we sat in the sand and we talked about Borges, and we talked about Cormac McCarthy, and we talked about some other directors. And it was the greatest conversation of my life, you know, to that point. And he wasn't condescending at any point in that. I was, what, 30 years old at that time, 29. At any point in the conversation, he could have dropped the hammer and said, "I'm Sam Shepard." You know, like I'm a Pulitzer Prize winner. Like, what are you saying? And he was so far from that. He just wanted to hear about, what am I reading? What am I watching? What music are you into? What are the things? You know, this is a person that was into art and into life. And I think that's kind of, I use that as an example to kind of remind myself, if I feel intimidated going into these situations, which is very easy, that like, if this person's here, if this person's in this line of work, they probably are interested in things like that, you know?
You said it yourself as well a bit earlier of this, when this script went out, that it was seen as a cool project. And I mean, the position the movies are in now, I know it's easy to talk movies down, and cinema in general down, but it's just like when this was originally supposed to come out, we were just on the verge of getting, in the UK, Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, we're having The Zone, we did All of Us Strangers, with just this amazing patch of films. Are you finding it's actors actively searching these films out, though, that there's almost a feeling amongst the acting community that stuff like this is rare, to be able to do this for a cinema screen?
Well, sure, but I think that's always probably been the case. You're kind of wandering through the jungle looking for or maybe the desert looking for water. You know, like the truth is, they don't grow on trees, and not that I consider myself a part of that necessarily. I'm flattered when people put me in those categories, but I know enough actors at this point. Yeah, and even producers and studios and everybody else. The funny thing is, it's everybody talks like they're not, these movies aren't wanted. It's not that. It's just really hard to find, you know? I mean, making a movie is alchemy. It is unfair how hard it is to make a good movie.
Yeah.
There's just so many variables. There's so many things that can go wrong, that when you make a good one, it feels a bit like a magic trick. And then there's this other thing, because you can go make a good one and then maybe nobody watches it.
Yeah.
To make a good movie that then people watch, I mean, geez, that's like that's threading a needle that not many people can say they thread. And it has something to do with the zeitgeist. It's, if anybody really understood it, you know, we wouldn't have studio executives getting fired left and right. It's a near impossible thing. But you are right, and I appreciate you saying it. I think it's just really easy to be negative, is the truth. And it's, why be negative? All of Us Strangers is one of the most beautiful films,
isn't it?
You know, out in a while. I mean, come on, like, and there's great cinema all around us.
There's also now a movement where people are, I'm really fascinated by, we've got Francis Ford Coppola selling half of his vineyard and Kevin Costner selling one of his spare houses. And they're at a level where, you know, they don't have to do that, but that's the way that they can get stories told on such scale. On the other side of that, I remember talking to Ben Wheatley, and his touch point was John Carpenter's Halloween, and he got hold of the script for that and worked out how much it's cost. And he said that on his worst day, he's just going to leave enough in the bank that he could make that. Not that exact film, but something on that scale. And it's like, go back to like Take Shelter costing what, $5 million, something like that.
About $650,000.
600. That's what I said. I'll edit that in so I sound perfect. But are you at a point in your career now where you've got the confidence that if you can't get something of scale off the ground again, you could find another $1 million movie to make? Would you be comfortable doing that?
Well, sure. I can't do anything else.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do anything else.
Do you own a vineyard? That would be useful.
I don't. No. I'm still I'm a paycheck to paycheck worker, you know. Luckily the paychecks have gotten bigger, and so that has helped. But no. I need to make another movie. I need to turn in a script, you know, to get my next paycheck, and I need those paychecks. So, because I haven't made a film that has, you know, had the success to where money's not a part of the equation. I think what I've realized, though, is that chasing money just is the wrong way to have continued success. I remember after I made Shotgun Stories, there was a big lull, you know, that came out in 2006, and I wasn't on set with Take Shelter until 2010. I mean, you know, I think where I was going was, the truth is, if you're chasing money, it's not a, you know, it's not actually a path to wide success. If you're, and you know, it sounds a little Pollyanna, but it really isn't. You know, the more you focus on yourself and your own emotions and your own connection to the material, you have a better chance of universality, you know, actually through specificity. I really do believe that for filmmaking. And so the answer to you is yes. I think I'm in a position right now where I not $1 million. Like I think I could put together $10 million with a cast. You know, it would have to be an interesting thing. And I think I could make any movie I want at that price point. And that is a really great place to be. It happens that I also want to make a $100 million sci-fi film, you know, yes. But that's because I want to work at that scale. I may regret it by the time I get to the other side of it, because apparently people get really weird when they put, you know, that much money into a film. But I have, I guess the way to look at it is, I have ideas that work at different budget levels. And I've never considered these films like, oh, well, let me see if this one gets made, and if it can't get made, then I'm not going to make it. I've never written a film that I didn't want to make. And so, well, no, that's not true. There's only one. And I wanted to make that, but I won't make it. But that's a recent development. And really, I've got these projects, and it's not a question of if I'm going to get it made. It's just when.
Now, this was the bit of the interview where the Zoom gods intervened and just briefly cut our conversation down, even though we'd pretty much wrapped it up. It was a case of when he's going to make it. I did just get a very quick chance to say farewell to Jeff Nichols, where we called scene on the whole thing. That went like this. Perfect place to stop. Thank you. Right. This has been a real delight. Thank you so much. And thank you to the team behind you who set all of this up as well. It's much appreciated.
Thank you. I really enjoyed talking.
And that's the end of my conversation with Jeff Nichols, who was an absolute delight. I could have spoken to him for a very long time. The Bikeriders is out on June the 21st, 2024 in the UK. It should be getting a nice wide release. Do seek it out and support it. I really thought it's a really strong piece of work. But it also brings to the end this particular episode of Film Stories. As always, thank you so much for listening, and thank you for your time. You can find more from me and, me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Simon Brew. More from the entire Film Stories project at Film Stories. Our website is filmstories.co.uk, updated every weekday with movie news, reviews, features, TV, gaming, whatever we can get away with, really. It's clickbait free as well. We're really proud of that, but it's very hard to get clickbait free sites noticed. If you go to store.filmstories.co.uk, filmstories.co.uk. You can pick up our assorted print magazines and Blu-ray, UK exclusive Blu-ray releases as well. We've put Film Stories extras on those as well for you. Thank you to everyone who supports our releases. Huge believer in physical products, and well, yes, we're not alone, thank goodness. That's what we've learned from making magazines and Blu-rays. If you like this podcast and want to support it, please do leave a positive review. Please do that like, subscribe-y thingy. I know it's annoying when people ask you that, but it really helps small independent podcasts such as this one. But I think that's it. I will leave you in peace, and thank you as always for your time and for your support. I'll be back with your regular episode of Film Stories soon. Until then, take care, look after yourselves, and do consider checking out the Bikeriders. Bye-bye.